Start by saying your name and then spell it.
Oh, my name is Len D'Ooge. Spelling of the last name is D''O''O''G''E.
And what unit did you serve with?
I served with the Company D of the 85th Regiment.
And your rank?
I was a second lieutenant.
And any medals, commendations, Purple Hearts?
I just had a Bronze Star, and of course the Combat Infantry Badge, and because I was an enlisted man for a couple of years, I got a Good Conduct Medal too. And then the other Army of Occupation, because we were over in Trieste area for a while on the disputed border between Yugoslavia and Italy.
Excuse me. And what was your job? Were you a rifleman, a mailman?
Well, I married, came back from the war in 46. Came back at 46. I went back to college on a GI Bill at Michigan State. Finished college and went into hotel administration, and then ended up in marketing, and was married in 48. My first wife, who passed away in 67. I had 4 children. And then at the time I was with Westinghouse, which in 1970 sold out to White Consolidated, and I stayed with the company for about 37 years.
So when you were at Michigan, you didn't happen to know a guy by the name of Don Todd, did you? He was a 10th Mountain man that also went to Michigan.
John who?
Don Todd.
I don't think I knew. I knew several. Carl Kerkus was a very good friend of mine. He was with the B Company of 85th also.
Yeah, my grandfather was K85.
Oh.
So I thought maybe you knew.
Yeah.
And so when you were in Camp Hale and Italy, what was your job?
I was not at Camp Hale. I never went to Camp Hale.
No.
Okay. I was a replacement officer. I'd been an enlisted man for 2 years, and decided that I was as smart as the officers were, and I'd go to OCS and get my commission. So I went to Benning School for Boys, and was commissioned in 1944. And about 10 days after that, after a leave at home, I was on the boat on the way to Italy. There were a lot of fellows in the 10th Mountain Division in my class at OCS, and they all went back to the 10th Division, which was amazing because most cases, when you got your commission, you did not go back to the same outfit. But those guys got promises from the division that they would be able to go back. So I knew a lot of 10th Mountain guys before I went to Italy, and it just was luck of the draw in a replacement depot, and I was assigned to the 10th Division in February of 1945 and stayed with them until the division broke up in late 1945.
Where in Italy did you meet up with the 10th Mountain Division? Do you remember what town or area?
I joined them right after Belvedere. During the assault on Belvedere, I was in regimental headquarters listening to all the guns and the explosions and things going off. But I joined them on Mount Gorgolesco. They were in static position at that time, and it was in about February 21st or 22nd. I don't know the exact date. And at that time, I was unceremoniously dumped off at the D Company CP and took over the heavy machine gun platoon of a man who moved up to be exec officer of the company. And of course, there was a domino situation where fellows had been either killed or wounded, and on the first attack on Belvedere, and naturally that had vacancies, and because of the vacancies, why they had replacements ready to move into the line. I did not know any of my platoon, but I went around trying to meet the non-com, find out who they were, and I tried to find my sergeant, and I did not have I couldn't find my platoon sergeant, and in fact, he kind of disappeared most of the time I was over there, and never did show up. And I had to promote one of the section leaders of the gun sergeant into be my platoon leader, platoon sergeant.
So these guys that had trained at Camp Hale for years and years together were they were really tight. What how did they accept you coming in?
Well, very rarely, but I felt. In a way, I was a little bit fearful because of the fact that I was a spanking brand new second Louis, And they had been together for a number of years, all through the training, D-Series, Camp Swift, all that. And all had been mostly through the 3 letters of recommendation, and I didn't have any 3 letters of recommendation. But I was assigned to them, and I just got to meet them as best as I could and as fast as I could, because they were spread out pretty well around 2 different sections. One gun section was on one side, one gun section on the other, and so I just scrambled around trying to meet them. And I think in one way it was probably being a replacement made it a little bit easier, because I could give orders, which and I didn't know who I was being involved in. I wasn't a long-time friend with any of them, so I could give orders pretty well and not be concerned about breaking up an old friend or something like that, like other people may have had that problem. But they pretty well accepted me, and maybe because I gave them my liquor ration. I didn't drink liquor, and I did give my liquor ration to the platoon, and they were very happy each time it came up on the line. Why I gave them the bottle.
Well, that's a way to make friends.
Well, a bribery, if you want to call it that.
There you go. Right. So, what was the the biggest battle that you were there for?
Well, my first combat experience after joining Gorgolesco was Mount Belvedere Bay. I supported at that time B Company, who took Mount Belvedere Bay. Mount Belvedere Bay was the apex, was at the top of a V, and the lines went down here with Castle Diana was off over to our left. And the attack was rather slow, and it finally the artillery was on top of exploding shells on top of Dulles Bay, trying to neutralize any opposition, which they didn't do a very good job of, but that's neither here nor there. And my guns were firing over the head of B Company as they went up. Then I displaced the guns and went up on top of Dulles Bay and joined the guys at B Company, tied in my guns with the light machine guns and the light machine guns of the rifle company. By tying in like that, we were able to pretty well protect the front, and any assault would come from the front or on either side of that apex, because we were totally exposed. We were on Dulles Bay for 11 days. We had to evacuate the wounded at night. We dug foxholes as best we could down the rock bottom. I've been over 6 foot. I ended up digging a foxhole with a little fellow who was about 5'10", Eddie Oatman, 5'9", and he had to dig a little bit deeper and a little bit longer for me. But it was a very harrowing experience. We got shelled continually, plus 4 counterattacks that first time we took the hill that first night. The last counterattack coming at the wee small hours of the morning. But we held the line and we kept the Germans back.
So you said that you were a little concerned, a little fearful coming in as a new second lieutenant. So what did it feel like to be in your first 11 days of combat and just throwing you in there?
It's a blur. The first days of combat were a total blur. I remember coming down off Gorgolesco and taking the section leaders and the squad sergeant that I had pointed down and talking to what the attack plan was for Mount Belvedere Bay, how we were going to be going through A Company. And we had to finally go on more or less close to the forward slope, because we were pretty well on a barren slope south of Dulles Bay. But the guys followed their directions pretty well. One incident I do recall, I had a very difficult time trying to identify where the fields of fire should be as the B Company went up the hill, and we had to pour this blanket the top of the hill with the 2 gun sections. And so finally I had a carbine, which I did not have any tracers, and I picked up an M1, and I carried the M1 the rest of the time through the war, because I could fire tracer bullets and show them where their fire should go. Unfortunately, in many cases, I was trying to do too much, especially on top of the hill after we took it. It was I'd just come out of OCS, and we'd all taken turns at being the platoon leader and doing company commander jobs, stuff like that in OCS. But it was great training at Fort Benning, but unfortunately didn't tell you and teach you what did you do and delegate. After Dallas Bay, we pulled back off the line, and the non-commissioned officers got together and came to me en masse and proceeded to, theoretically chew me out from one side down the other because I was trying to do too much, and I should just tell us what the objective is, tell us what the fields of fire should be, and we'll do the rest. You don't have to do it all yourself. And that stayed with me the rest of my life. And all through my career with Westinghouse, it just was a fantastic experience to be with those guys because they were true leaders, they were close-knit, but after that session, we became very good friends.
And so, you know, you got into what other stories do you have other than Dallas Bay? Any, you know, how about some, you know, that was a battle. How about some lighthearted moments? You remember any?
Some what, sir?
Some lighthearted moments. You know, goofing around. Anything like that you can remember?
There wasn't that much goofing around. I do remember that it seemed to be like it was all business. When we came back off the line after Dallas Bay, being up there for 11 days, came back to the line, we had a rest area to go to in Montecatini, just to get cleaned up and get fresh uniforms and take a shower. I was able to go to Venice, my first time ever in that, and go to the Palazzo Almara, which was on the Lido, and we had tremendous rest activities. We didn't do anything but lie around on the sand. We were told not to go out in the ocean, out in the sea too far because there were mines out there. I do recall very definitely in the Palazzo Almara having food served to us. It was GI food, including stew, on beautiful silver platters. I came back up, joined the group, and we went on night training. We had training missions, and then we went into the line as a holding position, strictly watching for when our patrols went out, making sure they got back safely, and we had the passwords and so forth. But as far as goofing around, there wasn't that much, in all honesty, with my guys, and we were scared. I mean, we didn't really know what we were doing. None of us did. Even as we moved off the line on April 14th, after a delay of a day because of the weather, and they couldn't the final jump off on April 14th to get us out of the mountains. I stayed. We all hunkered down in Foxhole, and we were firing support fire for the attacking infantry riflemen. And then I popped up out of my foxhole, and I found nobody was around. I couldn't find the rifle company I was supposed to be with. And come to find out, they forgot to let me know they were leaving. So they took off up towards the Po Valley up in the mountains, and I followed as close behind as I could. And as they got to one of the hills, I can't remember the number of the mountain, when they got up there, the tail end of their column was pretty well plastered by mortars and artillery. And all I could think of was that if I'd been on time, I would have been at the tail end of that column. Because as a support platoon of heavy machine guns, why, that's what we had, that was our main thrust, was to support them in their efforts. But we finally joined up with them. We kept our defensive positions. We kept marching, kept moving all the time to get out of the mountains. And finally on April 14th, or April 20th, we descended down into the valley, Po Valley, and it happened to be, I found out later that was Hitler's birthday, April the 20th. We protected Highway 9, which was a main east-west route into the valley. Of course, the Germans wanted to keep us out of the valley, but then we formed up in a task force to get across the valley as quick as we could, and we were leading the entire Fifth Army. Every town we're greeted with flowers and vino and more flowers and more vino and little loaves of bread and things. The people were very welcome and welcoming us through. It was marvelous till we got to the Po Valley. And when we got to the Po Valley, it was, when we got to the Po River, which goes through the center, there was no way to get across. And we were very fortunate to make sure that there was no enemy on the other side. So we set up our guns on the south bank of the Po River and fired over there to make sure we could neutralize anything. But ended up, and by the way, the film that I saw last night showed them coming to the Po Valley, and they all had the ducks, the mechanized trucks that would go into the water. We didn't have any ducks. We didn't have any mechanized them. We had no way of getting across except they brought assault boats up, and we paddled our way across. And as we went across, the shells were bursting over our heads. The Germans had taken their 88s and turned them down horizontally and timed their fire so it was over the river. And somehow we got across very safely. I did not see a DUCK or duck mechanized taking troops across the whole time I was by the river there. So it's a little erroneous on that film. But I expected that it makes for good filming, probably. We ended up with a small, defending a small town. They showed me where it was on the map. The river, small church was here, houses were here, and I found out as we started to dig in, it was the wrong town. So I like to say that I got a pretty good sense of direction, but we captured the wrong town. So we moved on ahead and joined up with one of the other infantry rifle companies and got the right place. And just as we left the town, we heard a Tiger tank in the back. They were north of us moving down, and the rumors came down that it was a Tiger tank coming down, and we were just glad to get out of there. The rush across the valley was unprecedented. I think it was in 14 days we made it all the way across, and the idea was to get the division to the Brenner Pass to put a cork in the bottle, as one of my men said, and keep them from going up into the so-called Hitler's Redoubt up in that area. But we ended up on Lake Garda at Malchesney with orders to move up the hill, up the mountain on the side of Lake Garda, and take out pockets of resistance that were up there where the fellows were, and that's where the war ended. We were very fortunate that we never had to go up on top of that mountain and get rid of those guys, or at least let them know that the war was over with. We had, after that, we went to Udine for just a brief period of time. I do recall we also, at Garda, and our company commander, Jim Hart, he played the piano. And we moved into this villa that had a beautiful piano, so we ate very well and listened to beautiful music from Jim. And then they told us to pack up. We're going over to Cividale, over on near the Trieste, near the Trieste area, the Yugoslav border, because they were making motions of taking back some of that territory. So we went out on patrol. It was armed patrol. I had armed patrol. I had certain towns I had to go to find out what the sentiments were of the local populace, find out where the Alpinis were, whether they were Yugoslavians, who was there. But we were welcomed there. In each case, they were very proud to show us their weapons. They were either the Garibaldi, or they were the communists. And these guys all had the green bandana that they wore around their necks. So I went from one town to the other and sent my reports back as best I could as to what we found. And as soon as I got back, they said, "Oh, well, Lieutenant, you're going to take some of your guys and go up to Austria, to the Großglockner. We're going to have a mountain climbing and ski school." Never having skied that much or rock climbed, it was a pretty interesting deal. So we went up to the Großglockner near Heiligenblut in Austria, and we got word that we were there for just a few days, word to get our tails back to Florence, because the train was leaving and we had to be on it to get back to the United States, because we were scheduled to go to Japan. So we loaded everybody up, overloaded, I should say, everybody up in 6x6 trucks and a few Jeeps that we had. Everybody was totally overloaded. We blew tires, one tire after the other, coming down. and had to finally, towards the end of the trip near Modena, we were able to tie up, had to actually tie the one of the rear wheels up in the air, and took the wheel off it, put it on the other one, and tied it like that. But going through the small towns was interesting because we had no way of letting the populace know. And you've ever been in Italy and seen the size of the streets there, a 6x6 pretty well takes up the street. So one of the group in the convoy discovered a engine that was a steam engine that was lying on its side, and he took the whistle off the steam engine and welded it, or got it attached to the bottom of the muffler, and put a lanyard up to the driver's side. And as it was on a hinge, so when the guy wanted to blow the whistle, he would take the lanyard, pull up on it, it would close it over by the muffler, and the pressure would let the whistle go off when we go to a town. So we were able to get through the last few towns very easily because he would pull that lanyard, and the train was going through town, but it was all of us guys on the 6x6.
So did you have any close calls anytime through that?
Well, a lot of close calls, especially my closest calls were on Dallas Bay. I lost my hearing on Dallas Bay, went badly, but I was young. I just turned 21 the month before, in January of 1945. Just turned 21, and but I was young, and as the explosions continued, my hearing left me totally, and the guys were yelling at me, trying to get me to hear what was going on. And but gradually, as the days went on, we're up there, then the hearing level went up, 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 up. The ear has a tendency to rejuvenate. But then one more explosion, and down it went again, and I lost it again. So as I was younger, each time, all through the time I was in Italy, my ears were ringing, itching terribly, but I never thought anything of it because it was always coming back. But I find out it would never come back 100%. It would come back at 98%, then it would come back at about 97.5%. Then it would, and it helped to hear better, but and I could tell when I was doing all right, because then things went pretty well with me. When I got home, we were on the Marine Fox we sailed out of Naples, and we did catch the train, by the way, out of Florence. Missed all the ceremonies, the medal ceremonies and things like that. So in the chow line the next day, they handed me my Bronze Star. That's how I got my Bronze Star. Then we took a 40-8 boxcar down to Naples from Florence. Got on the Marine Fox, headed out towards the Mediterranean. We didn't know we were going to go through the Suez Canal or we were going to go out through the Straits of Gibraltar back to the States, but we ended up going back to the States through Gibraltar. And the Marine Fox was in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean, or just outside the New York Harbor, and they dropped the first atomic bomb. And everybody went around saying, "What's an atomic bomb?" Because we did not know. But then a few days later, we found out when they dropped the second one, and everybody cheered. We knew then we would not have to go to Japan. And we entered New York Harbor, the fireboats and the people screaming from the piers and welcoming us back, and the ship was just overloaded on top, and we were all told not to get to one side because of an old Liberty ship, the Marine Fox. And we went underneath the George Washington Bridge, and people were all lining the bridge, waving at us as we came back to get off the ship. But I think it was Camp Shanks that was up there. I lived in New Jersey, and so all I did was got off the ship, grabbed my duffel bag and my backpack, and got on a bus and went home.
That was that. Huh?
That was the time. But then I was told to report back to the 10th Division because they were in Colorado Springs, and so I had to report back to Colorado Springs and the fort there, and until the division broke up. And the division was about ready to be broken up, and I got my orders to go to Fort Sam Houston. But before that, interestingly, the division had just come out of combat. It had just been all the experiences that we had. And the guys were downtown Colorado Springs, and we had to send out patrols of officers, from second lieutenants right on up to majors and lieutenant colonels. And we had to patrol the streets of Colorado Springs to make sure the fellows were dressed properly. Number two, they saluted. Get back to the GI way of doing things, and it made it very, very difficult to bring discipline back at that type of chicken discipline, I called it, to the truth. But they seemed to accept it fairly readily. The guys in the 10th Division were people who knew what to do, knew what was right, and knew what was wrong. And probably some of our biggest problems we had were some of the replacements or some of the ne'er-do-wells that would just came in at the end of the war. But as far as I was concerned, the guys that I dealt with were excellent. It's interesting to note that there's a fellow here at the convention, at our reunion, Cap Weinberg, his name, Marlon Weinberg. And Marlon was castigated and was told that he could not, he'd had to be confined to barracks because he was caught not saluting or with a tie off or something like that. And when I found out about it, I found out who it was. The guys came to me. I was the only officer there at Carson, and they said, well, can you help him out? So I went in and talked to Sergeant Smolensky, who was our first sergeant, and I said, can we do something for Weinberg? Because I didn't want nobody had brought charges against him yet. Yes, against him yet, but he had been confined to his barracks. So I got Smokey to make out a pass for him. And I went back to the barracks and handed him the pass, and I said, get the hell out of town. I said, and when you come back, hopefully this will blow over. And come to find out, that's exactly what happened. And as I said, interestingly enough, I got a thank you from him probably about 15 years ago, thanking me for helping him, for keeping his butt out of the brig.
That's great. Well, I want to thank you for coming in today. We have to cut it short because the next people are chomping at the bit.
I understand, yeah.
But I do appreciate you coming in